The day the Arizona Territory Courthouse erupted into chaos would forever be etched in Olivia Montgomery's memory. Her fingers trembled as she gripped the wooden railing separating her from the judge, while her cousin Frederick's accusations echoed through the crowded room. Outside, the merciless summer sun of 1878 blazed down on Tucson, but inside, a different kind of heat was building the smoldering fury of injustice. "Your Honor," Frederick declared with a practiced solemnity that made Olivia's stomach turn, "my cousin has suffered a complete mental breakdown following my dear uncle's passing. Her delusions about inheriting Sycamore Ranch are merely symptoms of her fragile female constitution, overwhelmed by grief." Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Olivia felt the weight of judgmental stares upon her back. At 22, she stood alone against the relatives who had once welcomed her with open arms, now united in their greed to claim what her father had explicitly left to her, the prosperous cattle ranch that represented her family's 3 decades of backbreaking work. "That is a lie." Olivia's voice wavered despite her resolve. "I have my father's will right here, signed before witnesses, a forgery," interjected Aunt Margaret with a theatrical sigh. "The poor child has convinced herself." "I've heard enough," Judge Hollister cut in, peering at Olivia over his spectacles with a mixture of pity and impatience. "This court will need to determine if Miss Montgomery is of sound mind to manage such substantial holdings. Until such determination, the property shall be held in trust by her nearest male relative, Mr. Frederick Montgomery." The gavel struck with finality. Olivia's world collapsed around her, the blood rushing in her ears, drowning out Frederick's smug reassurances to the judge about taking care of poor Olivia. She stumbled backward, searching desperately for a friendly face among the sea of strangers. That's when she saw him, a tall figure leaning against the doorframe at the back of the courtroom. He straightened suddenly, his eyes meeting hers across the distance. There was something in that gaze, not pity but recognition of the injustice unfolding before him. As Frederick approached her, his voice honey-sweet for the audience but his eyes cold, a deep voice cut through the murmurs of the dispersing crowd. "I believe the lady has proof of her claims, Your Honor, and I aim to make sure it's properly heard." All heads turned toward the newcomer as he strode forward. Dust from the trail still clung to his boots and the edges of his long coat. His dark hat was pushed back slightly, revealing intense eyes beneath the shadow of its brim. He moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to danger, though he carried no visible weapon in the courthouse. "And who might you be, sir?" the judge asked, clearly annoyed at the interruption when he had considered the matter settled. "Zachary Lancaster," he replied, removing his hat as he approached the bench. "I rode with Henry Montgomery on cattle drives for years. I was there when he drafted his will, and I'm here to speak for the truth of it." Frederick's cordial mask slipped momentarily. "This is preposterous." "Some drifter interrupting legal proceedings." "No drifter," Zachary corrected calmly. "Owner of the Triple L Ranch in the Northern Territory. Your father and mine were partners once, Frederick, though I reckon you were too young to remember me." Olivia stared at him in astonishment. Her father had indeed spoken of the Lancasters, but she had never met any of them. What was this man doing here, and why would he risk making an enemy of the powerful Montgomery relatives for her sake? The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Lancaster, this court has adjourned for today. If you have testimony to offer regarding Miss Montgomery's mental state or the validity of the contested will, you may return tomorrow at 10 o'clock. "I'll be here," Zachary said, his eyes never leaving Olivia's. "And I won't be alone." As the courthouse emptied, Frederick gripped Olivia's arm. "Don't get your hopes up, cousin. No cowboy can undo what's been done. The doctor has already signed papers regarding your condition. By this time tomorrow, you'll be on your way to the asylum in Phoenix for your own good." She wrenched her arm free. "You won't get away with this." "I already have," he whispered. "Your father should have known better than to leave everything to a woman. Now, be a good girl and come along. You'll be staying at our house tonight where we can keep an eye on you." "Actually," Zachary interrupted, stepping between them, Miss Montgomery has accepted my invitation to stay at the Tucson Hotel tonight, under the protection of myself and several respected members of the community who knew her father well." Frederick's face darkened. "You have no authority, no," Zachary agreed easily, "but Sheriff Tanner does. And he's waiting outside to ensure Miss Montgomery's freedom until tomorrow's hearing." True enough, when they stepped into the harsh sunlight, the sheriff stood beside his horse, watching the proceedings with interest. He nodded at Zachary Lancaster. "Been a while. Too long, Jim." Zachary turned to Olivia and offered his arm. Miss Montgomery, with her heart pounding, Olivia took the offered arm, acutely aware of Frederick's glare burning into her back as Zachary led her toward a waiting buggy. She had no idea whether to trust this stranger, but she knew one thing with absolute certainty: she could not trust her family. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as they pulled away from the courthouse. Zachary Lancaster's expression grew somber. "Because Henry Montgomery saved my life once, and I couldn't save his. The least I can do is make sure his final wishes are honored and his daughter protected." His words hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken history. Olivia studied his profile, the strong jaw, the lines around his eyes that spoke of years under the southwestern sun. He couldn't be more than 30, yet there was something in his demeanor that suggested he had seen more than his fair share of hardship. "My father never mentioned saving anyone's life," she said softly. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Your father wasn't one to boast, but he pulled me from a burning barn when I was just 16 after rustlers attacked our homestead. Took a bullet in the shoulder doing it." He glanced at her. "That scar he had right here?" He touched his right shoulder. "Yes," Olivia whispered, stunned. "He always said it was from a stray bullet during a cattle drive. That was Henry always downplaying his own bravery." Zachary fell silent as they approached the hotel, a substantial 2-story building that represented Tucson's growing prosperity. "He was a good man, Miss Montgomery, and he was proud of you. He spoke of you often during those long nights on the trail." Tears threatened to spill onto Olivia's cheeks, but she held them back. "Then help me understand why this is happening. Why would my family turn against me like this? That ranch has been successful for years. There's enough wealth to share." Zachary's hands tightened on the reins. "Greed rarely follows logic, Miss Montgomery, and your father's land sits on what might be the territory's most valuable water rights. With the railroad coming through, that property could be worth 10 times what it is now in just a few years." The buggy stopped in front of the hotel. Zachary jumped down and came around to help Olivia, his strong hands steadying her as her feet touched the ground. For just a moment, they stood closer than propriety might allow, and Olivia felt an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Miss Montgomery," he said quietly, "I promise you this: by tomorrow evening, you'll either be on your way home to Sycamore Ranch as its rightful owner, or I'll personally escort you to safety beyond your cousin's reach. Either way, you won't be going to any asylum." The conviction in his voice sparked something Olivia had thought extinguished hope. "Call me Olivia," she said impulsively. "After all, it seems we're allies now." His smile transformed his entire face, softening the hard lines and bringing warmth to those intense eyes. "Olivia, then. And I'm Zach to my friends." As he offered his arm to escort her inside, Olivia couldn't help wondering if this unexpected champion might become more than just an ally in her fight for justice. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Inside the hotel, a group of men rose as they entered the dining room, weathered faces that Olivia vaguely recognized from her childhood visits to town with her father. "Miss Montgomery," said a gray-haired man she remembered as Mr. Patterson, the banker. "We were devastated to hear about the proceedings today. Your father was a cornerstone of this community, and we won't stand by while Frederick and his cronies attempt to steal your birthright through such underhanded means." "Thank you," Olivia managed, overwhelmed by the show of support. "We've got some strategy to discuss," Zach said gently, "but first, you should eat something." It was only then that Olivia realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast. She allowed Zach to lead her to a chair, grateful for his steadying presence as the gravity of her situation continued to unfold around her. Over a hearty meal of beef stew and fresh bread, the men discussed tomorrow's hearing. Mr. Patterson had obtained copies of her father's banking records, showing regular deposits from cattle sales and careful management evidence against Frederick's claims that the ranch had been mismanaged since her father fell ill. Dr. Wilson, an elderly physician who had treated her family for years, expressed outrage at the medical assessment provided by Frederick's pet doctor. "I examined Olivia just 3 weeks ago when she came to town for supplies," he huffed. "She is one of the most level-headed young women I know. To suggest she suffered some sort of breakdown is not only false but malicious." As the evening progressed, Olivia's spirits lifted. These men, her father's friends and peers, believed in her. Their willingness to stand against the powerful Montgomery clan gave her courage. But most of all, she found herself drawing strength from Zach's unwavering presence at her side. When the meeting concluded, Zach escorted her upstairs to a room that had been secured for her, with a trusted hotel maid assigned to stay in the adjoining room for propriety's sake. "Try to rest," he advised, standing in the doorway. "Tomorrow will be challenging, but you won't face it alone." "Where will you be?" she asked, suddenly afraid to let him out of her sight. "Just down the hall, and there'll be a man watching your door all night." His expression darkened. "I don't trust Frederick not to try something desperate." Olivia nodded, understanding the unspoken danger. "Thank you, Zach. I don't know how I'll ever repay this kindness." "Just honor your father by fighting for what's rightfully yours," he replied. "That's payment enough." After he left, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. Outside her window, Tucson was settling into night, gas lamps casting pools of yellow light on the streets below. Somewhere out there, her cousin was plotting his next move. She wondered about Zach Lancaster, this man who had appeared like an avenging angel just when she needed him most. There was something in his eyes when he spoke of her father, something that suggested their connection ran deeper than a single act of heroism years ago. What else didn't she know? And would whatever brought Zach to that courtroom today be enough to save her tomorrow? Morning came too quickly. Olivia had barely slept, but determination fueled her as she dressed in her most respectable outfit, a forest green skirt and matching jacket over a cream blouse. Her mother's cameo pinned at her throat gave her courage as she twisted her chestnut hair into a neat bun. A knock at the door announced Zach's arrival. When she opened it, she found him transformed as well. Gone were the trailed, dusty clothes from yesterday. He wore a clean black suit, crisp white shirt, and string tie. His dark hair was combed neatly, though still too long by Eastern standards. He'd shaved, revealing a strong jawline previously shadowed by stubble. "You look," he began, then seemed to reconsider his words, "ready for battle." "As do you," she replied, noticing how the formal attire somehow made him appear more dangerous rather than less. "Are the others downstairs?" "Yes, and we've got a surprise witness who arrived on the morning stage." His eyes gleamed. "Your father's former foreman, Miguel Sanchez." Olivia's heart leaped. "Miguel, but Frederick said he'd return to Mexico." Another lie. "Frederick paid him to leave, but Miguel only went as far as Nogales. When he heard what was happening, he came right back." Hope surged through Olivia as they descended to the lobby where her father's friends waited. Together, they walked the short distance to the courthouse, forming a protective circle around her. As they approached, Olivia saw her relatives already gathered on the steps, Frederick looking smug, Aunt Margaret dabbing at non-existent tears with a handkerchief, various cousins arranged in a display of family solidarity. Frederick's smile faltered when he saw the group accompanying Olivia. His eyes narrowed at the sight of Zach in his cleaned-up attire. "Still playing hero, Lancaster?" he called out. "I would have thought you'd learned your lesson about meddling in Montgomery affairs." Zach's face remained impassive, but Olivia felt him tense beside her. "What history lay between these men? The only lesson I've learned," Zach replied evenly, "is that some men will stoop to anything for money." Before Frederick could retort, the courthouse doors opened and they filed inside. The room was even more crowded than the previous day. News of the dramatic confrontation had spread through town, drawing curious onlookers and gossips. Judge Hollister called the court to order, his expression grim. Yesterday's proceedings raised serious questions regarding both Miss Montgomery's mental competency and the validity of Henry Montgomery's will. Today, we will hear testimony addressing both matters. He peered at Zachary. Mr. Lancaster, I understand you wish to speak regarding the will. Zach stood. Yes, Your Honor, but first, I believe Dr. Wilson has information pertinent to Miss Montgomery's alleged condition. The elderly doctor rose, clutching his medical bag. Your Honor, I have been the Montgomery family physician for 23 years. I attended Olivia's birth and treated her through childhood illness, adolescence, and into adulthood. I was also present throughout her father's final illness, visiting the ranch weekly. At no point has Miss Montgomery displayed any symptoms of mental instability or emotional fragility. Frederick's lawyer, a slick-haired man named Bennett, jumped to his feet. Your Honor, Dr. Phillips has already provided a signed affidavit. Dr. Phillips, doctor. Wilson interrupted. Has never treated Miss Montgomery before last week, when Mr. Frederick Montgomery brought her to his office under false pretenses. Furthermore, Dr. Phillips received his medical degree through a mail order course and has twice been investigated for fraudulent diagnoses. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Judge Hollister frowned. These are serious allegations, Dr. Wilson. I have documentation from the Territorial Medical Board, the doctor replied, retrieving papers from his bag. And I have conducted a thorough examination of Miss Montgomery as recently as yesterday evening, witnessed by 2 nurses from the county hospital. She is entirely sound of mind. The judge accepted the papers, scanning them briefly before turning to Frederick. It appears your medical evidence may be compromised, Mr. Montgomery. Do you have other grounds for questioning your cousin's competency? Frederick rose smoothly. Your Honor, mental instability often manifests in subtle ways. My cousin has been making irrational decisions regarding the ranch since my uncle's death, refusing reasonable offers for portions of the land, dismissing experienced ranch hands, and isolating herself at the property. These are concerning behaviors from a young, unmarried woman. Olivia clenched her fists in her lap, fighting the urge to shout her denials. She felt Zach's steadying hand briefly touch her arm. I believe I can address those claims, Your Honor, came a heavily accented voice from the back of the courtroom. Miguel Sanchez stepped forward, his weathered face solemn beneath his gray-streaked hair. I served as foreman at Sycamore Ranch for 15 years under Henry Montgomery and remained for 3 months after his passing. Frederick paled visibly. This man has no standing here. He abandoned his position. After you paid me $500 to leave, Miguel replied calmly. You said it was for the good of Miss Olivia, that she needed family to help her, not hired hands, but when I heard in Nogales that you were claiming she was mad. He shook his head. That was not our agreement. The judge leaned forward. Are you suggesting Mr. Montgomery bribed you to leave the ranch, Mr. Sanchez? Yes, Your Honor, I have the bank draft he gave me. Miguel produced a folded paper from his vest pocket. And I can testify that before I left, Miss Olivia was managing the ranch exceptionally well. The cattle were healthy, the accounts balanced, and she had kept on every hand except those who refused to take orders from a woman. This revelation caused another wave of whispers. Frederick's lawyer huddled with him urgently, their heads close together in consultation. Judge Hollister cleared his throat. Let us move on to the matter of Henry Montgomery's will. Mr. Lancaster, you claimed yesterday to have knowledge of this document. Zach stood again. Yes, Your Honor. I was one of 3 witnesses to Henry Montgomery's last will and testament, signed 4 months before his death, when he was of sound mind and fully aware of his decisions. And where is this will now? The judge asked. I have a copy here, Zach said, producing a document from his inside jacket pocket. The original should be in the county records, filed by Henry's lawyer, Edward Thornton. Frederick interrupted. Thornton died 2 months ago and no such will was found among his papers. The only valid will is the one from 5 years ago, leaving the property to be divided among all Montgomery heirs. That's because you removed it from Thornton's office the day after he died, came another voice. A small, bespectacled man Olivia didn't recognize stood up from the gallery. I'm James Porter, Your Honor, Mr. Thornton's clerk. After Mr. Thornton's passing, I noticed several files had been disturbed. When I checked the registry, Henry Montgomery's updated will was among the missing documents. I saw Mr. Frederick Montgomery at the office the previous day, claiming to be collecting family papers. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hollister banged his gavel repeatedly for order. Frederick was on his feet, face flushed with anger. These are outrageous accusations. This is clearly a conspiracy. I have the registry book here, Your Honor, Porter continued, undeterred. And Mr. Thornton, suspecting something like this might happen, kept duplicate copies of important documents in his bank vault. I've brought the authenticated copy of Henry Montgomery's last will. As Porter approached the bench with a sealed envelope, Frederick lunged forward, attempting to grab it. Sheriff Tanner moved quickly, restraining Frederick as Judge Hollister accepted the document. The room fell silent as the judge broke the seal and began to read. After several minutes, he looked up, his gaze settling heavily on Frederick. This will, properly witnessed and notarized, explicitly leaves Sycamore Ranch and all associated properties to Olivia Montgomery, with strict instructions that the property not be divided or sold for at least 10 years after his death. He paused. It also includes a curious provision that should any family member contest this will or attempt to declare Miss Montgomery incompetent, they shall forfeit their share in a separate trust established for the extended Montgomery family. Frederick's face drained of color. Aunt Margaret gasped audibly. In light of this evidence and the questionable nature of the medical testimony against her, Judge Hollister continued, I find no basis for declaring Miss Montgomery incompetent. The will dated February 15, 1878, shall stand as Henry Montgomery's final testament. Sycamore Ranch and all associated holdings are the sole property of Miss Olivia Montgomery. The gavel struck with decisive force. This time, the sound signaled not defeat but victory. Olivia sat stunned, tears of relief streaming down her face as her father's friends surrounded her with congratulations. Through her tears, she saw Frederick being led away by the sheriff, protesting loudly about appeals and injustice. She saw Aunt Margaret collapsing into theatrical sobs. But most clearly, she saw Zach Lancaster watching her with quiet satisfaction, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. When the crowd around her thinned, he approached, offering his handkerchief. Your father would be proud, he said simply. She took the handkerchief, dabbing at her eyes. I don't know how to thank you, any of you, she added, looking around at the men who had stood by her. No need for thanks, Mr. Patterson said kindly. Henry would have done the same for any of us. As the courthouse emptied, Olivia found herself walking beside Zach into the bright midday sun. The world seemed transformed, colors brighter, air sweeter, the future suddenly wide open before her. What happens now? She asked, realizing she hadn't thought beyond this moment. That's entirely up to you, Zach replied. Though I would suggest not returning to the ranch alone immediately. Your cousin's humiliation is fresh, and men like Frederick can be dangerous in defeat. Olivia nodded, understanding his concern. I suppose I could stay at the hotel another night. I have another suggestion, Zach said, hesitation evident in his voice. I'm heading back to my ranch tomorrow. It's 2 days' ride north. You could accompany me, stay at my place for a week or so until things settle down. From there, I could escort you safely back to Sycamore with some of my men. The offer was both practical and improper. A single woman staying at a bachelor's ranch would set tongues wagging. Yet Olivia found herself strangely unconcerned with propriety after everything that had transpired. What about my reputation? She asked, more curious about his answer than actually worried. A wry smile crossed his face. My housekeeper is a formidable widow who'd challenge the virtue of anyone who dared question your honor. And besides, he added, out here, a woman who can run a cattle ranch has more important things to worry about than gossip. Olivia laughed, feeling lighter than she had in months. In that case, Mr. Lancaster, I accept your offer of sanctuary. As they walked toward the hotel to make preparations for tomorrow's journey, Olivia sensed she was stepping into a new chapter of her life, one where she would need all the strength and courage she could muster. But for the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel alone in facing what lay ahead, and if her heart quickened whenever Zachary Lancaster's eyes met hers. Well, that was a complication she would examine more closely in the days to come. Dawn broke crisp and clear over Tucson as Olivia waited outside the hotel, her small traveling trunk loaded onto a wagon alongside provisions for the journey. She wore her practical riding clothes, split skirt, sturdy boots, and a wide-brimmed hat to shield her from the unforgiving sun. A rifle rested across her lap, its weight familiar and comforting. Zach appeared leading 2 horses, his own powerful bay stallion and a gentle-looking chestnut mare. "She's steady and sure-footed," he explained, helping Olivia mount. "Good for long rides." As they prepared to depart, Dr. Wilson approached to bid them farewell. "Be careful, my dear," he advised Olivia. "Frederick was released on bail last night, charged only with document theft. The sheriff couldn't hold him on attempted fraud without a longer investigation." Olivia's hands tightened on the reins. "So he's free to cause more trouble?" "For now," Zach said grimly. "All the more reason to put some distance between you and Tucson." They set off with the wagon driver following behind, taking the northern trail out of town. Olivia cast one last glance at the dusty streets of Tucson, wondering when she would return and what awaited her when she did. The journey north revealed a Zachary Lancaster different from the polished advocate who had spoken so eloquently in court. Out on the trail, he was watchful, capable, reading the landscape with the ease of a man who had spent his life in the saddle. He pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territory's early days, painting vivid pictures of the land before the steady encroachment of settlers. "My father came here in '48, he told her as they made camp the first evening. "Back when this was still Mexican territory, he was looking for silver but found something better: good grazing land with reliable water. Built the ranch from nothing." Olivia watched him tend the campfire, his movements efficient and practiced. "And your mother, was she a pioneer too?" A shadow crossed his face. "She came later with a group of settlers. Their wagon train was attacked by raiders. My father's ranch hands helped fight them off, and afterward he offered shelter to the survivors. She was just 17, suddenly orphaned in a strange land." His voice softened. "They were married within a month." "How romantic," Olivia murmured, though she suspected there was more practical necessity than romance in such rapid frontier marriages. Zach smiled faintly. "It was, actually. They were devoted to each other until the end. She died when I was 14. Fever took her. My father followed 2 years later." He poked at the fire. "That's when the trouble with your family began." Olivia leaned forward. "What happened?" "Your uncle Frederick's father tried to buy our land after my father died, claimed my father had borrowed money from him that I couldn't repay. It wasn't true, but at 16, fighting a grown man with connections was nearly impossible if your father hadn't intervened." He shook his head. "Henry testified that my father never took loans from anyone. He stood by me when few others would." Understanding dawned on Olivia. "That's why Frederick hates you. His father failed because of yours, and yours," Zach corrected. "Frederick's grudges run deep. When I heard about Henry's death, I knew you might be in danger, especially once I learned you'd inherited everything." "How did you know to come to the courthouse yesterday? Your timing was providential," he suggested with a slight smile. "Miguel sent word to me when Frederick paid him to leave. I've been watching the situation from a distance, but when I heard about the competency hearing." His expression hardened. "I've seen that tactic before. Once they had you declared incompetent and institutionalized, you'd never have gotten out." A chill ran through Olivia despite the warm evening. "They really would have sent me to an asylum." "Frederick wants that land," Zach said simply. "Men like him don't stop until they get what they want." They fell silent as the wagon driver returned from tending the horses. The conversation shifted to lighter topics: cattle prices, weather predictions, stories of particularly stubborn livestock. Yet beneath the casual exchange, Olivia sensed a growing connection with this man who had risked so much for her based on an old debt of gratitude. That night, Lying in her bedroll beneath the vast canopy of stars, Olivia found herself wondering what kind of man Zachary Lancaster truly was beyond his role as her rescuer. Tomorrow they would reach his ranch, and she would see another facet of his life, the home he had built, the world he inhabited when not charging into courtrooms to save damsels in distress. The thought brought a smile to her lips as she drifted into sleep. They crested a ridge shortly after midday on the second day of travel, and Zach reined in his horse, gesturing at the valley below. "Triple L Ranch," he announced with quiet pride. Olivia drew in a breath at the sight. The ranch house was larger than she had expected, a sprawling single-story structure of adobe and timber, with a wide veranda wrapping around three sides. Outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse formed a neat compound around it. Beyond, cattle grazed on vast expanses of grassland interspersed with oak and mesquite. A creek meandered through the property, its banks lined with cottonwoods whose leaves flickered silver in the breeze. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. "It's home," he replied simply, but the warmth in his voice revealed how deeply he felt about this place. As they rode down toward the ranch, men appeared from various directions, ranch hands pausing in their work to observe the newcomers. Zach raised a hand in greeting, and several men waved back. A woman emerged onto the veranda as they approached, tall and straight-backed despite her advanced years, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun. She shaded her eyes with one hand, watching their approach with evident curiosity. "That's Mrs. Abernathy," Zach explained. "Housekeeper, cook, and self-appointed guardian of my moral welfare. Don't let her stern appearance fool you. She's the kindest soul in 3 territories. She just doesn't like anyone to know it." Olivia found herself both amused and intimidated as they dismounted in front of the house. Mrs. Abernathy descended the steps, her keen eyes taking in every detail of Olivia's appearance. "So you've brought home a young lady, Mr. Lancaster," she observed, her tone giving nothing away. "Miss Montgomery, I presume we've heard about your troubles." "News travels fast," Olivia remarked, extending her hand. "I'm grateful for your hospitality, Mrs. Abernathy." The older woman accepted the handshake, her grip firm. "Any friend of Mr. Lancaster's is welcome here." She fixed Zach with a pointed look. "I've prepared the blue room for Miss Montgomery. It's the one farthest from yours with the best view of the sunrise." Zach had the grace to look slightly abashed. "Mrs. Abernathy believes in propriety above all else." "As should you," the housekeeper retorted without heat. "Now come inside. You both look like you could use a proper meal and a wash after the trail." The interior of the ranch house revealed Zach's unexpected prosperity. While not ostentatious, the furnishings were solid and well-crafted, the rooms spacious and airy. Navajo rugs adorned polished wood floors, and the walls held an eclectic mix of practical implements and surprising touches of refinement, landscapes in gilt frames, bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes. "You have a lovely home," Olivia commented as Mrs. Abernathy led her to the promised blue room. "Mr. Lancaster's mother had a civilizing influence," the housekeeper explained. "She believed that just because they lived at the edge of wilderness didn't mean they should live like savages." She opened a door to reveal a charming bedroom with whitewashed walls, a brass bed covered in a handmade quilt, and simple but elegant furnishings. "The bathing room is through there. I'll have hot water brought up shortly." Left alone, Olivia moved to the window, which indeed offered a spectacular view of the eastern landscape. In the distance, mountains rose purple against the sky, their peaks still holding traces of winter snow despite the warmth of late spring in the valley. How strange life was, she reflected. A week ago, she had been fighting desperately to hold onto her inheritance, alone against her scheming relatives. Now she stood in the home of a virtual stranger who had risked his own safety, and standing to help her a man who seemed to grow more intriguing with each passing hour. Cleaned and changed into a fresh dress, Olivia joined Zach and Mrs. Abernathy for a late lunch. The food was simple but delicious: tender beef, fresh bread, vegetables from the kitchen garden, and a sweet apple pie that reminded Olivia painfully of her mother's baking. "You mentioned news of my situation had reached you," Olivia said as they ate. How much do people know? Mrs. Abernathy sniffed. Enough. Jim Carson's boy rode through last week with mail from Tucson. He said your cousin Frederick was boasting at the saloon about how he'd soon be owner of Sycamore Ranch once you were safely institutionalized for your own good. Her expression conveyed exactly what she thought of such tactics. Disgusting business. It caused quite a stir among the ranchers, Zach added. Henry was respected. The idea of his daughter being treated that way didn't sit well with most folks. I'm starting to understand why you came to my rescue, Olivia said. It wasn't just personal loyalty to my father, was it? It was also about preventing Frederick from gaining more power in the territory. Zach met her gaze directly. Would it disappoint you to know my motives weren't entirely selfless? Frederick, with control of Sycamore's water rights, would threaten half the independent ranchers in the area. No, Olivia replied honestly. It makes more sense, actually. Pure altruism is rare. Not that Mr. Lancaster isn't capable of it, Mrs. Abernathy interjected. He's got his father's sense of justice and his mother's soft heart, though he tries to hide the latter. Mrs. Abernathy believes I'm a better man than I am, Zach said with a self-deprecating smile. And you believe you're worse than you are, the housekeeper countered, rising to clear the dishes. Shame you can't meet somewhere in the middle and see yourself clearly. After she left, a comfortable silence fell between them. Olivia studied Zach across the table, noting the way sunlight from the window caught in his dark hair, bringing out hints of auburn. What will you do now? He asked suddenly. Once you return to Sycamore, the question caught her off guard. Continue what my father started, I suppose. Run the ranch, maintain the breeding stock he was so proud of. She hesitated. But I won't lie, it won't be easy alone. The hands respect me well enough, but business associates, bankers, buyers, they see a woman and assume incompetence. You could sell, Zach suggested, though his tone indicated he didn't truly believe she would. Live comfortably in San Francisco or back east. Never, Olivia said firmly. That land is Montgomery land. 3 generations of my family have worked it. I won't be the one to surrender it. Something like approval flickered in his eyes. I expected no less, but there are other options besides selling or struggling alone. Such as, he seemed about to elaborate when Mrs. Abernathy returned, effectively ending their private conversation. Miss Montgomery must be exhausted after your journey, Mr. Lancaster. Perhaps you could show her the gardens while I prepare her room for evening. Taking the hint, Zach stood and offered Olivia his arm. Would you care for a tour of the property, Miss Montgomery? I would indeed, Mr. Lancaster, she replied, slipping her hand into the crook of his elbow. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the ranch yard. Zach led her past the kitchen garden with its neat rows of vegetables to a more ornamental space behind the house, a small oasis of flowering plants, shade trees, and a stone bench beside a tiny pond. My mother's garden, Zach explained. Mrs. Abernathy keeps it going in her memory. It's lovely, Olivia said, trailing her fingers over a blooming rose bush. My mother had a similar space at Sycamore. I try to maintain it, but I don't have her gift with growing things. What do you have a gift for? Zach asked, watching her with genuine curiosity. Olivia considered the question. Numbers, ledgers. I can look at a herd and calculate its value within dollars. I can review accounts and find discrepancies others miss. She smiled ruefully. Not very feminine talents, my aunt always said. Useful talents on a ranch, Zach countered. More valuable than flour arranging out here, Olivia laughed. Try telling that to the ladies of Tucson society. I'd rather not, he said with mock horror. I value my life too much to face their disapproval. Their eyes met, and something shifted between them, a recognition of shared humor, of compatible minds. Olivia felt a flutter of awareness that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the man beside her. The moment stretched, electric with unspoken possibility, until a ranch hand's distant call broke the spell. Zach stepped back slightly, clearing his throat. I should check on some business before dinner, he said, his voice rougher than before. Feel free to explore the grounds, you're safe here. As he walked away, Olivia sank onto the stone bench, her heart beating faster than the brief exchange warranted. What was happening to her? Was this attraction merely a natural response to her rescuer, gratitude confused with deeper feelings? Or was it something more, a genuine connection to a man, unlike any she had encountered before? The next few days fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings found Olivia exploring the ranch with Zach, learning about his operation, comparing notes on cattle management and water conservation. Afternoons she often spent with Mrs. Abernathy, whose gruff exterior quickly gave way to maternal warmth once she determined Olivia was not one of those useless society girls. In the evenings, they gathered in the comfortable parlor where Zach sometimes read aloud from one of his many books while Olivia worked on mending or simply listened, enjoying the rich timbre of his voice. Mrs. Abernathy usually retired early, leaving them in a propriety that grew increasingly relaxed as the days passed. On the fourth night, as thunder rumbled in the distance and rain began to patter against the windows, their conversation turned again to the future. "I received word today that Frederick has left Tucson," Zach said, closing the book he'd been reading. "Apparently he's gone to Phoenix to consult with lawyers about contesting the judge's ruling," Olivia sighed. "He won't give up easily." "No," Zach agreed. "Men like Frederick believe they're entitled to whatever they desire. Your father's will thwarted him, but he'll look for other vulnerabilities." "Such as?" Zach hesitated, then spoke frankly. "A woman alone running a valuable ranch is vulnerable in multiple ways. Even with your legal rights established, you'll face challenges from men who believe they can intimidate or pressure you into selling, or worse. Marry me for my property," Olivia finished wryly. "I'm not naive, Zach. I've already received 3 courtship inquiries since my father died, all from men who never showed interest before I inherited." A muscle tightened in Zach's jaw. "I'm not surprised. You're a prize catch now, beautiful, intelligent, and land-rich. Every opportunist within 100 miles will come calling." The compliment, embedded in his practical assessment, warmed her despite its matter-of-fact delivery. "Are you suggesting I need a husband to protect my interests, Mr. Lancaster?" His eyes met hers across the room. "I'm suggesting you need allies you can trust, Miss Montgomery. Whether that includes a husband is entirely your decision." The crackling fire filled the silence between them. Outside, the rain intensified, drumming against the roof and streaming down the windows. "What if I don't trust my own judgment?" Olivia asked softly. "After being so wrong about my family, how can I be sure of anyone's true intentions toward me?" Zach set aside his book and moved to sit beside her on the sofa, careful to maintain a respectable distance. "You trust in actions, not words. Watch what people do when they think no one is looking. Observe how they treat those who can't benefit them." His voice gentled. "Your judgment isn't flawed, Olivia. You were betrayed by people who should have protected you. That's not your failure, it's theirs." The use of her first name, rare despite their growing friendship, sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "You've been watching me," she observed, "evaluating whether I can handle returning to Sycamore." A smile touched his lips. "I've been watching you," he acknowledged, "but not to evaluate your capabilities. Those were evident from the moment you stood in that courtroom, dignity intact despite everything arrayed against you." "Then why?" she asked, holding her breath. The fire popped loudly, sending sparks up the chimney. Zach's eyes reflected the dancing flames as he seemed to wrestle with his response. "Because I find I can't look away," he finally said, his voice low. "Because in a very short time you've become someone I think about when you're not in the room, someone whose courage and determination I admire, someone whose smile I—" He stopped, looking away. "Forgive me, that was inappropriate." Olivia's heart raced. "No," she said quickly. "It wasn't inappropriate, it was honest." She hesitated, then added her own truth. "I think about you too." His eyes returned to hers, searching. "Olivia, I don't want you to confuse gratitude with other feelings. What you've been through, the trauma of betrayal and then sudden rescue, it would be natural to form an attachment based on those circumstances." "Is that what you think this is?" she challenged gently. "Merely gratitude?" "I think," he said carefully, "that you deserve time to know your own mind, free from pressure or expectation." The wisdom and restraint in his words only increased her growing feelings for him. How many men would put her well-being above their own desires? How many would recognize the complexity of her situation instead of taking advantage of it? Thank you, she said simply. For understanding that, he nodded, and for a moment she thought he might say more. Instead, he stood, putting distance between them. It's getting late, you should rest. Tomorrow I thought we might ride out to the north pasture. There's a view there I think you'd appreciate. I'd like that, she replied, recognizing his retreat for what it was, not rejection, but respect. After he bid her good night, Olivia remained by the fire, listening to the storm and contemplating the storm brewing within her own heart. Zach was right, she needed time to sort through her feelings, to separate gratitude from deeper emotion. But in her heart, she already knew the truth. What she felt for Zachary Lancaster had grown far beyond simple appreciation for his help. The question now was what to do about it, and whether he truly returned those feelings or was simply being kind to a woman in distress. The next morning dawned clear and fresh after the night's rain. Olivia dressed in her riding clothes, anticipating the promised excursion. When she entered the dining room, however, she found Mrs. Abernathy alone, setting out breakfast. Mr. Lancaster rode out at dawn, the housekeeper explained, noting Olivia's questioning look. Trouble with the herd. Some of the cattle broke through a fence during the storm. He left word that he'd be back by midday for your ride. Disappointed but understanding the priorities of ranch life, Olivia settled in to help Mrs. Abernathy with household tasks. As they worked side by side kneading bread dough, the older woman broke her usual reticence about personal matters. He's different since you arrived, she commented, punching down the dough with practiced movements. More like the boy he was before all the trouble. Olivia's hands stilled. What trouble? Mrs. Abernathy gave her a measuring look. Has he told you about Sarah Blackwell? No, Olivia replied, a strange discomfort settling in her stomach. Who is she? The housekeeper sighed. Was not is, she was his fiancée 5 years ago, daughter of a businessman from Prescott, pretty thing but city-bred through and through. She claimed to love the idea of ranch life, of being a pioneer woman. Her tone made clear her skepticism. They were to be married in the spring. What happened? Olivia asked, though part of her didn't want to know. Winter came, Mrs. Abernathy said simply. A hard one. Isolation, cold, the endless work of keeping livestock alive through blizzards. By February, she'd had enough. Left on the mail coach without even saying goodbye, just a note saying she wasn't suited to frontier hardships and had accepted another proposal back east. Olivia winced. How terrible for him. It nearly broke him, the housekeeper confirmed. Not just the rejection, but the deception. She'd never intended to stay, was using him until something better came along. She gave Olivia a pointed look. That's why he's cautious now, especially with a woman whose situation is complicated, understanding dawned. Zach's hesitation, his concern that her feelings might be temporary or based on gratitude alone, these weren't just considerate gestures but self-protection from a man who had been deeply hurt before. I would never use him that way, Olivia said softly. I believe you wouldn't intend to, Mrs. Abernathy replied, her hands never stopping their work. But intentions and outcomes don't always align, especially when the heart is involved. Before Olivia could respond, hoofbeats sounded outside. Mrs. Abernathy glanced out the window and frowned. That's not Mr. Lancaster. It's Bill Turner from the Rocking T, her frown deepened. And he's riding hard. They hurried outside as the rider pulled up, his horse lathered from exertion. Mrs. Abernathy, he called, touching his hat. Is Lancaster here? We've got trouble. He's out with the herd, the housekeeper replied. What kind of trouble? Turner's eyes flickered to Olivia, then back to Mrs. Abernathy. Frederick Montgomery and some hired guns showed up at Sycamore Ranch yesterday. They've taken over the place, claim they're securing it on behalf of the extended family pending a new hearing. Olivia gasped. That's impossible. The judge ruled. They don't care about the ruling, miss, Turner said grimly. Montgomery's saying you abandoned the property, proving you're not fit to manage it. He's got the ranch hands at gunpoint and has sent riders to all the neighboring spreads warning them to stay out of Montgomery business. Cold fury replaced Olivia's initial shock. How dare he? Those men are loyal to me if they're being held against their will. It gets worse, Turner continued. Word is Montgomery's been talking about how you've compromised yourself by staying unchaperoned at a bachelor's ranch. He's telling anyone who'll listen that you're mentally unstable and morally suspect. Mrs. Abernathy made a sound of outrage. That snake. Miss Montgomery has been a model of propriety under this roof. But Olivia understood the strategy all too clearly. He's trying to destroy my reputation so that even if I keep legal ownership, I'll be socially ruined. No one will do business with me, and eventually, I'll have no choice but to sell. She turned to Turner. How many men does he have? 6 or 7 gunmen, from what my foreman saw when he rode past yesterday. Real hard cases, not local boys. Olivia's mind raced. We need to find Zach. This isn't just about my ranch anymore. If Frederick gets away with this, no property is secure. Mrs. Abernathy nodded grimly. Bill, can you ride north to find Mr. Lancaster? He's checking the boundary where Cottonwood Creek meets the ridge line. I'll find him, Turner promised, wheeling his horse around. As he galloped away, Olivia turned to Mrs. Abernathy. I need to prepare. I won't let Frederick steal what's mine through intimidation. The housekeeper's eyes widened at her tone. What are you planning, Miss Montgomery? Olivia's expression was stone. I'm planning to take back what's mine by force if necessary. By the time Zach returned, galloping into the yard with Turner close behind, Olivia had changed into her most practical clothes and was checking the condition of her father's old Colt revolver, which she'd brought from Tucson. Zach strode into the house, his expression thunderous. I've heard. We're not letting him get away with this. Relief flooded Olivia at his immediate support. I was afraid you might try to stop me from going. Stop you, he raised an eyebrow. I know better than to try, but you're not going alone. He turned to Turner. How many men can you spare from the rocking T? 4 or 5, Turner replied. And I reckon the Circle J and Myers Place would each send a few when they hear what's happening. Good. Have your men meet us at Cottonwood Crossing by sundown. We'll camp there tonight and ride to Sycamore at first light. As Turner departed to gather his men, Zach and Olivia retreated to his study to plan. Maps of the surrounding territory covered his desk as he outlined potential approaches to the ranch. Frederick will have lookouts, Olivia warned, pointing to elevated positions around the property. My father always said Sycamore was built to be defensible against Apache raids originally, but it works against any threat. Zach nodded. That's why we won't approach from the obvious directions. There's a dry creek bed that runs behind the south pasture. It's overgrown, but a man on horseback can navigate it. If we come in that way before dawn, we might surprise them. As they refined the plan, Olivia found herself watching Zach's face, the intensity in his eyes, the firm set of his jaw. This was yet another side of him she hadn't seen, the strategist, the leader, the man prepared for conflict. Why are you doing this? She asked suddenly. This could be dangerous. You've already done more than enough to help me. He looked up from the maps, his gaze steady. Because it's right. Because Frederick's actions threaten every independent rancher in the territory. Because he hesitated. Because I care what happens to you, Olivia, more than I should, perhaps. The admission hung between them, weighted with unspoken emotion. Olivia stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes. I care about you too, she said softly. And not from gratitude or confusion or any other convenient explanation. I care because of who you are, the man who stands for what's right even when it's difficult. The man who sees me as I am and values rather than fears my strength. For a breathless moment, she thought he might close the distance between them. Instead, he gently touched her cheek, a fleeting caress that sent warmth cascading through her. When this is over, he said, his voice rough with restrained feeling, we'll have this conversation properly, but now we need to focus on getting your ranch back. She nodded, understanding the wisdom of his restraint even as part of her rebelled against it. When this is over, she agreed. The next few hours passed in a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Abernathy packed food supplies while Zach selected weapons from his gun cabinet and instructed his foreman on managing the ranch in his absence. By late afternoon, they were ready to depart. Olivia mounted her borrowed mare, adjusting her hat against the lowering sun. Beside her, Zach looked every inch the frontiersman, rifle scabbard attached to his saddle, revolver at his hip. 4 of his most trusted ranch hands would accompany them to the meeting point. Ready? He asked, studying her face for any sign of hesitation. She nodded firmly. Ready. As they rode out, Olivia felt a strange calm settle over her. Whatever happened at Sycamore, she would face it with courage, not just for herself, but for her father's legacy and for the future she was beginning to envision. A future that, she hoped, might include the man riding beside her. The camp at Cottonwood Crossing swelled as evening approached. Turner arrived with 5 men from the Rocking T. Shortly after, 3 riders from the Circle J appeared, followed by Old Man Myers himself and his 2 sons. By nightfall, they had assembled a force of 16 men, not an army, but enough to make Frederick think twice if it came to a confrontation. Around the campfire, Zach outlined the plan. "We're not looking for bloodshed," he emphasized. "Our goal is to show Montgomery that his intimidation tactics won't work, that the ranchers of this territory stand together against this kind of lawlessness. If we can force him to back down without violence, that's the best outcome." "And if he doesn't back down?" Myers asked, his weathered face grim in the firelight. Zach's expression hardened. "Then we're prepared to do what's necessary to restore Miss Montgomery's rightful place at Sycamore." The men nodded solemnly. Each understood the risks. These weren't hired guns, but neighbors, men with families and their own lands to protect. Their willingness to stand with her touched Olivia deeply. As the others settled in for the night, Olivia found a quiet spot away from the fire, gazing up at the vast canopy of stars. Zach joined her, offering a blanket against the evening chill. "Having second thoughts?" he asked, sitting beside her. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, drawing comfort from his warmth nearby. "No, just reflecting. My father would be proud to see how his neighbors have rallied to defend what's right. He believed in community, in ranchers supporting each other." "Henry was a wise man," Zach agreed. "He understood that out here we survive by standing together." They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and risk, but tonight offered a precious moment of peace. "If something happens to me tomorrow," Olivia said suddenly, "promise me you'll make sure Frederick doesn't get Sycamore. It should go to someone who'll respect the land and the people who work it." Zach turned to face her, his expression fierce in the starlight. "Nothing is going to happen to you." "I won't let it." "You can't promise that," she countered gently. "We both know the risks." "I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, I'll protect you," he insisted. Beyond that, he took her hand, his touch sending a current through her, even through the fabric of her gloves. "Beyond that, I promise that Sycamore will remain as your father intended, a legacy of honest work and fair dealing." Impulsively, Olivia leaned forward and pressed her lips to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. She felt him tense at the contact, heard his sharp intake of breath. When she began to pull away, his hand came up to cup her face, holding her there for a moment longer than propriety allowed. "Olivia," he murmured, her name a caress in itself, "when this is over." "I know," she replied, reluctantly drawing back, "when this is over." They returned to the campfire separately, both aware of the watching eyes of their companions. Sleep came fitfully to Olivia that night, her mind alternating between tomorrow's confrontation and the promise of what might come after. They rode out well before dawn, moving silently through terrain that grew increasingly familiar to Olivia as they approached Sycamore. The eastern sky had just begun to lighten when they reached the dry creek bed, their hidden approach to the ranch. Zach signaled for silence as they dismounted, leaving the horses with 2 men while the rest proceeded on foot. Olivia's heart pounded as she recognized landmarks from her childhood: the lightning-struck oak, the peculiar rock formation her father had called Nature's Cathedral, the gentle rise that would soon reveal her home in the valley below. When they crested the rise, the ranch lay spread before them in the gray pre-dawn light. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and a solitary figure walked between the barn and the bunkhouse, a guard making his rounds. "One lookout on the porch," Zach whispered, gesturing with his chin. "Another by the corral, the rest must be inside." Olivia nodded, scanning the familiar buildings with a strategist's eye. "The bunkhouse windows are dark. They must have locked the hands in the storage cellar. It's the only place secure enough to hold men against their will. Myers, take 3 men and circle around to free the ranch hands, Zach instructed. Turner, you and your boys approach from the east when you hear my signal. The rest of us will take the direct approach once the lookouts are neutralized. What's the signal? Turner asked. A grim smile touched Zach's lips. You'll know it when you hear it. The group split up, moving with practiced stealth through the pre-dawn shadows. Zach, Olivia, and 4 others crept toward the main house, using outbuildings for cover. When they were within 50 yards, Zach turned to Olivia. Stay here until I call for you, he said in a voice that brooked no argument. She bristled instinctively. This is my ranch and we're here to get it back for you, he cut in, but I need to know you're safe while we secure the situation. Please, Olivia. The concern in his eyes softened her resistance. Fine, but if shooting starts, I'm not hiding in the shadows, he squeezed her shoulder. I wouldn't expect anything less. With hand signals, Zach directed 2 men to circle around behind the lookouts. Minutes ticked by as Olivia watched, tense with anticipation. Then, so quickly she almost missed it, the guards were subdued, one with a blow to the head, the other with an arm around his throat until he lost consciousness. Zach's signal came in the form of 3 rapid-fire shots into the air, followed by his voice, amplified in the morning stillness. Frederick Montgomery, you're trespassing on private property. Come out with your hands visible. Chaos erupted. Men poured from the main house, weapons drawn. From the east, Turner's group appeared, rifles raised. From the bunkhouse came shouts as Myers' team located and freed the imprisoned ranch hands. In the midst of the confusion, Frederick emerged onto the porch, a rifle in his hands and fury on his face. Lancaster, he spat. I might have known you'd be behind this interference. Zach stood his ground, revolver aimed steadily at Frederick's chest. This isn't interference, it's justice. You have no right to be here. I have every right, Frederick retorted. My unstable cousin has abandoned her responsibilities. The family is merely protecting its interests. Your cousin, Zach replied evenly, is right here, ready to resume her rightful place, and she's brought neighbors who don't take kindly to your brand of frontier justice. Frederick's eyes darted around, taking in the armed men now surrounding the house. His hired guns looked increasingly uncertain as they realized they were outnumbered. This is none of their concern, Frederick insisted, though his voice had lost some of its conviction. That's where you're wrong, came a new voice. Olivia stepped forward, ignoring Zach's warning glance. When you threaten one landowner's rights, you threaten all. These men understand that, even if you don't. She moved to stand beside Zach, her head held high. You've lost, Frederick. The ranch is mine, legally and morally. Your hired guns are surrounded, my ranch hands are free, and witnesses from 3 counties are watching you commit armed trespass. Leave now while you still can or face the consequences. For a tense moment, Frederick's finger tightened on his rifle trigger. Zach shifted slightly, positioning himself more directly in front of Olivia. The morning breeze carried the scent of sage and dust as everyone waited to see which way Frederick would jump. Then, with a curse, he lowered his weapon. This isn't over, he snarled. No jury will side with a woman who spent unchaperoned nights at a bachelor's ranch. Your reputation is finished, Olivia. Actually, came a feminine voice from behind them, Miss Montgomery has been under my supervision the entire time. Olivia turned in astonishment to see Mrs. Abernathy approaching on horseback, looking remarkably composed despite having apparently ridden through the night. Mrs. Abernathy, she exclaimed, what are you doing here? The housekeeper dismounted with surprising agility for her age. Did you think I'd let you face this snake without proper support? I've been Mr. Lancaster's housekeeper for 15 years. My word on matters of propriety carries weight in 3 territories. She fixed Frederick with a withering stare. And I will testify under oath that Miss Montgomery's conduct has been above reproach at all times. Frederick's face contorted with impotent rage as his last weapon scandal was stripped away. It's over, Montgomery, Zach said quietly. Take your men and go, don't come back. Something dangerous flickered in Frederick's eyes. For a heartbeat, Olivia thought he might raise his rifle again, might choose destruction over defeat, then his shoulders sagged. "Get your things," he barked at his hired guns. "We're leaving." As Frederick and his men gathered their belongings under the watchful eyes of the ranchers, Olivia moved through her home, assessing the damage. Surprisingly little had been destroyed, though the house had the disheveled look of a place occupied by men with no respect for its contents. In her father's study, she found Frederick hastily gathering papers. She stood in the doorway, blocking his exit. "What are you taking?" "Personal correspondence," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. "Show me," she demanded, holding out her hand. With obvious reluctance, he surrendered the bundle of documents. A quick glance revealed what she suspected these weren't personal letters but legal papers relating to water rights and property boundaries. "Another theft attempted and foiled," she observed coldly. "Leave everything, Frederick. You've lost enough honor today without adding petty larceny." His face flushed with humiliation and rage. "You think you've won? A woman can't run a ranch this size alone. Sooner or later you'll fail, and when you do, I'll be waiting." "She won't be alone," Zach said from the doorway, his voice carrying the weight of a vow. "And she won't fail." Frederick looked between them, a bitter smile twisting his lips. "So that's how it is. The great Zachary Lancaster falling for another helpless female. Did you learn nothing from Sarah Blackwell, cousin? Or do you enjoy being used by ambitious women?" Zach's expression didn't change, but Olivia saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. "Miss Montgomery is nothing like Sarah," he said evenly. "And the only person being used here is you, Frederick, by your own greed and ambition." "Get out," Olivia said, her voice quiet but firm. "You are no longer welcome at Sycamore Ranch. If you return, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." With a final venomous glance, Frederick pushed past them, storming out to where his men waited. Minutes later, the sound of hoofbeats marked their departure down the main road. Slowly, the tension began to ease from the ranch. The neighboring ranchers gathered in the yard, accepting coffee and thanks from the freed Sycamore hands. Mrs. Abernathy took charge of the kitchen, producing a hearty breakfast seemingly out of thin air. Through it all, Olivia moved in a daze of exhaustion and relief, shaking hands, expressing gratitude, reassuring her concerned ranch hands that she was unharmed. It wasn't until mid-morning, when the last of their allies had ridden off with promises of continued support if needed, that the reality fully hit her. She had reclaimed her home. She was safe. She found Zach on the front porch, staring out at the familiar landscape of Sycamore Ranch. The morning sun highlighted the fatigue in his face, the stubble darkening his jaw after their early start. "Thank you," she said simply, coming to stand beside him. "For everything." He turned, his eyes softening as they met hers. "You did most of it yourself. I just provided the audience." "We both know that's not true," she replied. "Without you, I might be in an asylum by now, and Frederick would be measuring this house for new curtains." A small smile touched his lips. "He does seem the type to redecorate immediately." Their shared laughter broke the last of the tension between them. Olivia leaned against the porch railing, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. "I can't believe Mrs. Abernathy rode all the way here in the dark." "That woman has more strength and determination than most men half her age," Zach said admiringly, "though she'll be complaining about saddle soreness for weeks." They fell into comfortable silence, watching as the ranch resumed its normal rhythm around them. In the barn, hands attended to horses. In the kitchen garden, Mrs. Abernathy was already harvesting vegetables for the midday meal. The world continued, changed yet unchanged. "You should rest," Zach said eventually, noting her fatigue. "It's been an ordeal." "I will," she promised. "But first, you said we'd talk when this was over." Something flickered in his eyes, hesitation, fear, before he nodded. "I did." "Frederick mentioned Sarah Blackwell," she said carefully. "Mrs. Abernathy told me a little about her." Zach's jaw tightened. "Frederick has a gift for finding painful truths to use as weapons." "I'm not Sarah," Olivia said softly. "I won't pretend to love this life only to abandon it when it becomes difficult. The ranch is in my blood, just as it's in yours." He turned to face her fully, searching her expression. "I know you're not Sarah. You're stronger, braver, more certain of what you want." He took a deep breath. "That's what terrifies me. Why? She asked, genuinely puzzled. Because this time it's real, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. What I feel for you isn't the infatuation I had for Sarah. It's deeper, more solid, if this ended badly. Understanding dawned. It wasn't that he feared she would leave like Sarah, had he feared the depth of his own feelings, the vulnerability of truly opening his heart. Olivia took a step closer, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. Zach, I can't promise that nothing will ever go wrong between us. Life doesn't offer those guarantees, but I can promise that I know my own mind and heart. What I feel for you isn't gratitude or convenience or any other comfortable explanation. What is it then? He asked quietly. She met his gaze steadily. Love. Unexpected and unplanned, but real nonetheless. The word hung between them, both a challenge and an offering. For a long moment, Zach didn't move, his expression unreadable. Then, with a sound that was half laugh, half sigh, he closed the distance between them, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. I thought I was protecting you by keeping my distance, he murmured, giving you time to be certain. I am certain, she whispered. Are you? His answer came not in words, but in action as he lowered his head and captured her lips with his. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning, then deepened as she responded with a fervor that matched his own. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer as hers wound around his neck. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Olivia Montgomery. I think I have since that moment in the courthouse when you stood with your head high despite everything arrayed against you. Joy welled up within her, bright and overwhelming. And I love you, Zachary Lancaster, my unexpected champion. He smiled, the expression transforming his face. What happens now? Now, she said, practical despite her happiness, we rebuild what Frederick damaged. We strengthen Sycamore's defenses against future threats. We marry me, he interrupted, his eyes never leaving hers. Not for protection or convenience or any practical reason, but because I want to build a life with you, because I want to wake up every morning with you beside me, because I can't imagine my future without you in it. Tears of joy sprang to Olivia's eyes. Yes, she said simply. Yes to all of it. He kissed her again, sealing their promise with a tenderness that spoke of all the tomorrows stretching before them. When they separated, Mrs. Abernathy stood in the doorway, her expression a mixture of satisfaction and feigned disapproval. Well, it's about time, she declared. I was beginning to think I'd need to lock you two in a room together to get any action. Zach laughed, keeping one arm firmly around Olivia's waist. Would you be scandalized, Mrs. Abernathy, if I told you I've asked Miss Montgomery to be my wife and she's agreed? The housekeeper sniffed, though her eyes twinkled. Scandalized? No, relieved is more like it. Now perhaps we can all get some peace instead of watching you two dance around each other. She paused, then added more gently, your parents would have approved, Zachary, both of you, as Mrs. Abernathy returned to her duties. Zach and Olivia remained on the porch, watching the sun climb higher over land that had nearly been stolen from her land that would now be part of a shared legacy. There will still be challenges, Olivia said thoughtfully. Frederick won't give up entirely. The ranch requires constant attention. Our properties are miles apart. Details, Zach replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. We'll face them together just as we faced this crisis. Between your head for figures and my obstinate determination, I'd say we make a formidable team. She leaned into his embrace, content in a way she hadn't felt since before her father's illness. Yes, she agreed softly, I believe we do. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Olivia Montgomery became Olivia Lancaster in a ceremony attended by every respectable ranching family in the territory. Judge Hollister himself performed the service, taking particular pleasure in the fact that his previous ruling had led to such a joyful outcome. Frederick, true to form, had made one last attempt at disruption, filing a petition with the territorial court, claiming that Olivia's marriage invalidated her inheritance, since control would now pass to her husband. The petition was dismissed with prejudice when Zach and Olivia presented their marriage contract, which explicitly maintained Olivia's independent ownership of Sycamore Ranch while establishing joint management of both properties. As they exchanged vows beneath an arch of autumn flowers on the veranda of Sycamore Ranch, Olivia thought of her father, how he had believed in her ability to carry on his legacy, how his friendship with Zach's family had unknowingly set the stage for this union, how proud he would be to see the two ranches allied through love rather than business. The celebration lasted well into the night, with musicians playing and lanterns glowing in the trees. Mrs. Abernathy, resplendent in her finest dress, presided over the festivities with the air of a general who had successfully completed a complex campaign. When the last guests had departed or retired to the rooms prepared for them, Zach led his bride to the master bedroom, now their bedroom, and closed the door on the world outside. "Happy, Mrs. Lancaster?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. Olivia's smile was radiant. "Happier than I ever thought possible, Mr. Lancaster." As he lowered his lips to hers, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that this was where she belonged, not just at Sycamore Ranch, but in the arms of the man who had spoken for her when she stood alone, who had recognized her strength rather than seeing it as a threat, who loved her completely for exactly who she was. Outside their window, two properties, the Triple L and Sycamore, stretched under the moonlight, no longer separate entities but parts of a shared future. And somewhere, Olivia was certain, her father was smiling his approval on the union that had grown from his own acts of friendship and justice years before. The inheritance he had left her turned out to be far more than land and cattle. It was a legacy of integrity, courage, and love, a legacy she and Zach would honor and extend for generations to come. In the years that followed, the Lancaster-Montgomery alliance became legendary in the territory. Their combined operations weathered drought, market fluctuations, and the continuing expansion of the railroad with remarkable resilience. Together, they pioneered new breeding techniques that improved their stock, implemented water conservation methods that became standard practice throughout the region, and established fair working conditions that attracted the best ranch hands in the territory. Frederick Montgomery eventually left Arizona entirely, moving to California, where he lost most of his remaining fortune in ill-advised mining investments. Olivia, hearing of his circumstances, sent him a modest annual stipend, not from obligation, but from the generosity her success afforded her. He never acknowledged the assistance, but he cashed every check. Mrs. Abernathy divided her time between the two ranch houses, training a younger woman to eventually take her place while refusing to admit she might someday be too old for her duties. Her fierce loyalty to both Zach and Olivia never wavered, though she took particular delight in caring for their children when they arrived, first a son with Zach's dark hair and Olivia's determined chin, then twin daughters who combined their parents' best qualities in subtly different measures. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage, Zach surprised Olivia with a gift, a formal document combining their two ranches under a new name, Legacy Ranch. Though they had operated as one entity in practice for years, the symbolic joining moved Olivia to tears. "Your father would be proud," Zach said as they stood on the ridge overlooking their expanded domain. "You didn't just preserve his legacy, you expanded it beyond anything he could have imagined." "Our legacy now," Olivia corrected gently, leaning into his embrace. "Built on the foundation he laid, but shaped by both of us." As the sun set over Legacy Ranch, painting the landscape in gold and crimson, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the desperate young woman fighting alone in a Tucson courtroom to the confident ranch owner, wife, and mother she had become. The path had not always been smooth, but every challenge had been met with the strength that came from true partnership. Her father had given her an inheritance of land, but Zach had given her something even more precious, the certainty that she was never alone, that her voice would always be heard, that her strength would always be valued. And that, Olivia knew, was the greatest legacy of all.